Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Whistlethrowers. It's a great way to interact with our show. Our DMs are always open for questions, topic discussions, and more. You will be able to find our new episodes and other announcements there.
He needs to make a really big change because he's about to lose hundreds of millions of dollars if he doesn't flip it around really quick. Thanks for tuning back to the Whistlethrowers podcast. This is Jack Mubarak, joined by
Aiden Tiksinski.
And so there's been a couple key moves in the NFL recently as of this week. So first off, we'll start off with Daniel Jones getting his massive 4-year, $160 million contract with $35 million in addition in incentives. Aiden, I want to start off with you. What does this mean for the rest of the league and guys that are looking for big paydays?
Yeah, I think it just shows this is where the quarterback market is going. Guys are going to be expecting between 35 to 45 million a year. I mean, we talked about Daniel Jones before. I think I've said this a lot, that I think he's one of the more underrated quarterbacks considering what he's done with the Giants team that just did not have a lot of weapons around him. So I'm not shocked that he got a contract extension with the Giants. I am shocked that it's 40 million. I was thinking it was going to be 30 to 35. That was my guess per year. And the fact that it's 40, I feel like it is a lot for a guy that has one playoff win. This isn't to discredit Jones at all. I absolutely did think that he was going to get re-signed by the Giants and he was going to get a decent amount of money, considering that it is fair for him to argue that he's basically led the Giants almost single-handedly with a little bit of Saquon Barkley, but that's basically it from the offensive side of their team. I don't know what this will do with other quarterbacks. I know with Hurts, it will show that Hurts will probably get somewhere between, I would say with Hurts, considering that he was the runner-up in MVP, 45 to 50 million a year. I would not be shocked if that's where he's at.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit less, but it's going to be in that range. And that's what I expect for a lot of quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, who are going to be getting extensions who are that good.
Yeah, it really kind of messed up the league, I think. Especially, like, obviously we're Eagles fans. We all talked about it on the show. Like, I don't like the idea of paying Hurts that much money because, like, we got to build everyone around the team, not just Hurts. And we got key guys that are likely out the door in CJ Gardner-Johnson, Brandon Graham, and Javon Hargrave, just to name a few. I don't know if 1 year of Jalen Hurts playing like an MVP is worth $50 million, and I know like you can't really say that anymore because of what Daniel Jones just got, and it's always going to be a competitive, oh well, this guy got this much and this guy got that much and I deserve this much because I'm better than both of these guys. So I think it's going to be a really big problem for teams like the Ravens and the Eagles. I think the Ravens are under a lot more pressure than the Eagles are to get this deal done because they're going to be due up at the same time now that Lamar got the franchise tag. However, Lamar has been a good quarterback for longer than Jalen Hurts has been a good quarterback. And they had this big fiasco last year with the contract extension. He bet on himself. It didn't really work out. But now you got a guy who's, I don't think is one of the elite quarterbacks in this league getting paid $40 million a year. It will definitely be interesting to look at those two teams in particular, but I don't really see Lamar staying in Baltimore much longer.
Yeah, neither do I, especially because there are so many options at this point that are just much more exciting for him than Baltimore is. Baltimore has not really set up a team that can be successful. When it comes to weapons, they're very comparable to the Giants. Their defense is just as good as the Giants, if not better, which is a big reason why Baltimore was able to get to the playoffs and still be competitive against a very good Bengals team with a backup quarterback in. I would be interested to see where Lamar wants to go. The Jets are still an option, although it's looking as of right now that they're leaning towards Aaron Rodgers, which we will get to in a little bit. I would think that Tampa Bay might be a little bit exciting. They're an aging roster, sure, but you still got Mike Evans. You still got Leonard Fournette, who can be a very high ceiling running back at certain points. And they made it to the Super Bowl with Tom Brady only 2 years ago, and they've still made a successful playoff run the last 2 years. Now, granted, last year they finished 8-9, but a lot of that was because Brady was not himself. If you bring in a very good quarterback, I could see Tampa Bay getting back to the playoffs. So I think that at this point, Lamar has a lot of options other than Baltimore. And I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to play out the market a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's in his best interest because Baltimore in particular has done a terrible job getting guys around Lamar, especially at the receiver position. And I'm not saying it's totally their fault. Like, Lamar definitely had a part in that. I feel like guys don't really want to play with him. They'd rather play with a pocket passer. And I know that's kind of a narrative that people feel like really for, really against, and it's kind of hating on Lamar's play style. But we've seen it. There's been like 3 or 4 major off seasons where receivers could have played with a quarterback the caliber of Lamar Jackson, but they'd rather go with a pocket passer. You can't really say that it's not a thing.
You can't, however, the knock on Jalen Hurts before this year was that he was a running quarterback, and yet the Eagles still brought in A.J. Brown. Now, I do think that Hurts has developed into a better passer than Lamar has, but Lamar still has a great arm. So I think that the bigger concern for a wide receiver looking somewhere is my quarterback going to stay healthy? And the biggest issue for Lamar isn't his playing style in the sense that he can't pass the ball. It's the fact that his playing style is too reckless for me to be a big-time wide receiver and say, I want to go to this team because this quarterback's going to play 17 games. I don't think that's the case for Lamar anymore, and that's what I think is going to hold him back from getting a big-time wide receiver until he goes to a team that already has one.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned the Bucs, it seems like a great option because they have Godwin. I know he can't stay on the field that much, but when he's on the field, he's great, and Mike Evans is a solid wide receiver 1, so it would be a good opportunity for him to shut up the critics without actively trying to recruit a receiver to go play with him in Baltimore.
Yeah, and I mean, even with the Saints getting Derek Carr, the NFC South is still the weakest division in football by far. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be shocked for Lamar to go there with a pretty talented team and see what he can do. Obviously, it's up to Tampa Bay what they want to do, but they're looking for a big-time quarterback. There's no reason for them to settle with the roster that they have at this point. I just don't see that happen.
Yeah, something's got to give. I don't think they're going to. So you hinted at Derek Carr getting signed to the Saints. This kind of really narrows down the quarterback search for the Jets. Rodgers has met with the team in California. Looks like the sides have mutual interest after Rodgers did his silence, darkness retreat in Oregon. So it looks like he's leaning towards playing. And do you think that there is any dark horse option for the Jets, or do you think it's just solely Aaron Rodgers at this point?
I was really hoping they were to get Derek Carr. I really like Carr as a quarterback. He has issues with turnovers. He's not always been the most healthy quarterback, but he still, to me, has a lot of upside, and he reminds me a lot of Matthew Stafford, of a guy who put up decent numbers with a team that was not successful. Now, granted, the Raiders have put in a lot more money than Detroit ever did when it comes to talent, and they just fell flat. But that was also due to coaching, I think. And I thought that Carr going there would make a difference. I don't see any other dark horse. I think the Jets' mindset was we are going to get one of these top free agent quarterbacks. Rodgers definitely being up there. Now, there is rumors that Aaron Rodgers might not have the interest in playing football anymore. I don't know if that's true. No one's said anything. Rodgers has not said anything. And that's really what you have to go off with. And I think that's the biggest concern with me about the Jets is you're relying on a person who is unreliable. If you had gotten Derek Carr immediately, you would have had a quarterback that's a lot less talented than Rodgers, but you know where Carr's mindset is at. He is a guy that wants to continue playing football and can do it at a decently high level. Rodgers has a lot of upside, sure, but is it worth the headache of having Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, especially when it comes to being in a market in New York where Rodgers has never played in? Playing in Green Bay, you're basically almost given this sort of protection of the media that you don't get in any other NFL city. And then you're going to one of the biggest media markets in the entire country. I don't know how well that will gel with Rodgers. Most people have said it won't be a problem. I tend to want to agree with that, but honestly, I don't know. And that's a huge red flag for me when I'm looking for a quarterback, especially one that you're hoping will lead you to a Super Bowl, when Rodgers is close to 40 at this point. And although his numbers went down, which wasn't really a factor of him, I don't believe, it's still not a great sign that he had a down year as his career is winding down.
Did you see what the Hall of Fame Jets players said about Aaron Rodgers possibly coming to the Jets?
I think so, but do you want to remind me quickly?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, he basically said that Aaron Rodgers is known to like chastise his wide receivers for little mistakes, and he's going to be joining like a young wide receiver core, and it wouldn't work well in that city. With
that's not one I did see, actually. It's an interesting point. It's one that was made a lot by critics of Aaron Rodgers this year, is the fact that he wasn't at training camp with his young wide receivers, and that it took him up until week 5 or 6 to finally get that connection, which again is a concern because the Jets also have very young, talented wide receivers. Rodgers would need to want to work with them immediately from training camp through the preseason up to the regular season. I don't think that's where Aaron Rodgers' mindset is, and that's a concern to me.
Yeah, I unlike a lot of people, don't think the Jets and Rodgers is as good of a fit as everyone said it was. And earlier I did think it was going to be a great fit, but for sure beats Green Bay. Like, staying in Green Bay is just not the move for Rodgers at this point of his career, but there's not many spots that are open to taking Rodgers with his money, his age, his antics. The Vikings haven't made any motion to looking for anyone else. They seem to want to ride with Kirk Cousins into this next year. So I thought that would have been the ideal scenario for him, but it looks like the Vikings have other plans. I definitely think he should go to the New York Jets, but I don't think it's going to be like a Super Bowl contending situation.
Do you imagine if Rodgers follows the Favre route and goes from Green Bay to New York to Minnesota?
I wish he skipped the Jets part, but that would be something.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in his career, Rodgers has already far surpassed Favre, so he has no reason to do that, but it would be interesting to see him attempt that. Although this Jets team, to me, is better than the one that Favre joined, although that one was supposed to be a Super Bowl contending team, and they crashed and burned pretty quickly. So we'll see what happens with the Jets. I have a lot of faith in a lot of their guys, except the quarterback position, and that's the one at this era of football you need to be solid at to contend for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm definitely keep watching with a close eye on that situation. Another thing I'm looking forward to is seeing Brock Purdy's arm and how he's probably not going to be ready for the start of this season, but what they're going to do with Trey Lance or possibly Jimmy G. I don't know how they're feeling about Trey Lance because they kind of thought he was going to be that guy, and then Brock Purdy comes in and he just became everything that they thought Trey was going to be. And Jimmy is just still there, and I don't know what they're going to do with them. If I were to bet, one of them has to go this season, and I really don't know who it is at this point.
Yeah, I do remember reading something where the Jets were actually looking heavily at Garoppolo before the Derek Carr sweepstakes happened, so they could potentially go back to him. It's tough. Between Rodgers and Garoppolo, I would kind of lean more towards Rodgers, but like not 100%. I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Wait,
I really don't know.
Are you serious? It's a debate between Garoppolo and Rodgers?
Well, the thing is, Garoppolo is younger, so you'll have him for longer. The offensive weapons that he has with the Jets would be comparable to the 49ers, but they would be younger, which means you have a 2 to 3 year window, which you don't really have with the 49ers. You kind of do, but also you're going to have to start paying some of these guys. And the 49ers will start losing pieces in the next year or two. You can count on that. So if this was Aaron Rodgers 3 years ago, 100% Rodgers without a question. Now I feel like there is a little bit of a question mark.
Well, for me, it is a no-brainer because unlike Garoppolo, Rodgers plays full seasons of football. Unlike Garoppolo, Rodgers has won a Super Bowl. Unlike Garoppolo, Rodgers is a Hall of Famer. They're both very expensive. Like, I get that totally, and I know Rodgers has a significantly bigger contract than Garoppolo does. However, yeah, you could nitpick at both their egos to an extent, but I've never seen a report of Rodgers smiling on the sideline when his team is getting blown out in a playoff game.
Yeah, no, that should leave a bad taste in every 49ers mouth, and the fact that I don't feel like it has is just shocking to me. I don't know why they would let that fly, considering how badly they lost in the NFC Championship, but that's really neither here or there. And people that listen to the show know that I really do not like Jimmy Garoppolo as a quarterback. But when it comes between him and Rodgers, again, Rodgers is way more talented. You mentioned it. He has way more success. He's won a Super Bowl. He can stay healthy. All that is 100% accurate. But the age of Aaron Rodgers and how expensive his contract at his age is my biggest issue with wanting Rodgers over Garoppolo.
I think we hit all the main points with the NFL, so we could talk about the updates in the Ja Morant story. I couldn't think that this could get any worse, but it did. So this was recorded on March 8th, and today the Denver police station did confirm that they are not going to criminally charge Ja for the live stream at the club, the alleged gun in the picture, because they can't fully determine whether it was a gun in that freeze frame. So he won't get charged criminally, but since we last talked about him, his suspension has been upgraded from what was going to be 2 games to indefinitely, and we've been seeing rumors that it could be up to 50 games. But thing about that is, it wasn't like an official ceiling of a suspension for him. That was just what Gilbert Arenas got for a very similar offense. But that was under a different commissioner in David Stern. And we've seen Adam Silver be much more lenient on players acting out. I've said it, I don't think I've said it on the show, but I've said it many times to both of you guys. I think Adam Silver is one of the most overrated commissioners in all of sports history. I don't really think he's done much to progress the game, and on top of it, I think he's had zero control over the players, especially from a disciplinary standpoint, and that's something that David Stern, whether you agreed with his punishments or rule changes or not, like, he really had those guys in check and saved guys like Carmelo Anthony's career. And I know the uniforms on the sidelines was not popular, but it just showed that, like, he had authority over the players, and that's not something that I've seen with Adam Silver at all during his tenure with the NBA.
Yeah, this whole situation, I mean, I talked about it last week. Bringing a gun into any situation like that is just not smart. And I'm not trying to make this a political podcast at all. If you, whatever your belief is on guns, that's your opinion. I'm not going to criticize that. What I will say, though, is you shouldn't bring a gun into a conflict because you're just asking for trouble. And you know the laws in the city. You know that you can't just bring guns into nightclubs. And to flash it over an Instagram Live when you have all different types of followers, including children watching this, you just have to be smarter about the type of role model you are. And I would hope that after what happened with all the stories coming out that he would change his mindset. He clearly hasn't. Hopefully this suspension will do something about that. He needs to be the one to force himself to change. The NBA can do whatever it wants disciplinary-wise, and it should, rightfully so. The NBA cannot force Ja Morant to change his attitude about how he is acting. It can't force Ja Morant to make better decisions. The only person that can force Ja Morant to be a smarter person is Ja Morant.
I don't know if you saw this, but it was reported earlier today that Damian Lillard liked a tweet that said Damian Lillard is actually about that life and Ja Morant is just playing it as an act. And
and here's the thing. I get what Dame is trying to say. No one should want to be like that. Like, in my mind, I don't believe that you should want to be acting like a gangster or trying to portray yourself as a tough guy for show or whatever these guys think that they're trying to do. And I get that that is the mindset that you grow up with in certain situations. I totally understand that. But at this point, these guys are getting paid millions of dollars. The reason that they got into basketball, a lot of them, is so they wouldn't have to live that type of life. So to be commenting back at it, to me, I don't understand why you would do that.
I think the Damian Lillard situation is kind of hinting at players are really going to test him when he gets back on the floor. And I think guys who like the trash talk, like Patrick Beverley, guys like that, he's saved from Dylan Brooks, because if Dylan Brooks was on the other side of the floor as him, he would give him hell. But guys that like to get under players' skins are really going to test Ja Morant, and I don't know, based on his past actions, how he's going to take it. And I think it's going to get him in even more trouble, and I think this is just going to be a snowball effect. I hope he can get himself together and snap out of this and make the correct changes that he needs to make in his personal life, whether that means cutting off people, telling the people, certain people in his life to like cut the shit, or maybe it all starts with him. I don't know. That's for him to decide, but he needs to make a really big change because he's about to lose hundreds of millions of dollars if he doesn't flip it around really quick.
Yeah, no, he definitely is. I'm surprised that more companies haven't dropped him after this, honestly. It's unfortunate, like you said, and I 100% agree. Hopefully he can get the help that he needs because this is not the way that someone who is mentally stable acts in society. And I don't know what's triggered it. I know that he's always been a very aggressive basketball player, and that's fine if you're going to leave it on whatever athletic field that you play on. But the moment you bring it off the court, off the field, off the pitch, and start just normalizing that type of aggressiveness is going to lead to problems. And it already has for Ja.
Definitely needs to work on himself. I hope the time away from the game will be productive. I hope, like Carmelo Anthony, he could really fix it around because I see a lot of similarities in the situation. The Grizzlies season is done if that suspension gets upgraded.
I hate with everything that's happened to touch on the basketball aspect of it, but you have to because, like you said, this does totally change the whole outlook on the West. I mean, there's basically now no competition from the Nuggets making it to the finals. It was the Grizzlies, and without Ja, they're just not the same team.
Yeah, well, they're definitely going to lock up first because the Grizzlies are 7 games behind, and if they're going to be missing Ja, let's say, at least 3 more games, that will just give them a further bump. Yeah, if the West doesn't really have like a lot of teams that are solidified. I mean, we don't really know what the Grizzlies are. We don't know what the Kings are, my bad, because it's their first time being a top seed and before I was alive, probably. The other teams that I could think of that are actually threats have just been formulated over the trade deadline, like the Mavericks and the Suns, and I don't know if they'll be able to string it together. But yeah, Jokic may have a really easy path to the Western Conference Championship.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see if there is no competition in the West, what that will mean for the finals. Because as of right now, I'm betting on the fact that the top teams in the East are all going to beat up on each other in the playoffs. I don't see any team from the East making it to the playoffs without at least going through one 7-game, like a full 7-game series. And I just don't know what that will mean for the finals. If the Nuggets can go to the finals on pretty easy runs and then have to play a team that has played multiple long series to the playoffs, that could be very beneficial for them. Even though I think that most of the top teams in the East have a better roster than they do.
Yeah, hands down. And it could either serve them, like you said, or it could either be very detrimental to them because they're going to get the best of whoever comes out of that juggernaut of the East. It's going to come down to health, and Nuggets have a way better chance of being healthy if they have a smooth sailing road to representing the West in the finals versus the East team that is going to be banged up, like going at each other at least 6 games every series. Jokic may finally get the ring that he needed on his resume, and no one will ever be able to say that he's not the MVP again. So there's a lot of narratives at stake with this Ja Morant move that aren't really associated with Ja Morant.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw earlier today, too, I believe it was, that Kevin Durant in warm-ups, it looked like he twisted his ankle a little bit. Yeah, so he's not playing at all in tonight's game against the Thunder. I don't think that there's been any update on what exactly the injury was, but he was slated to play, and now he is definitely not playing tonight. So it will remain, that will be something to definitely look out for. As of tonight, the Suns are beating the Thunder. Devin Booker has 17 points. He's basically single-handedly leading the Suns past the Thunder right now. So that could be a huge issue. Even if Durant comes back from this and it's not serious, which I don't believe it is, the fact that he's still getting hurt at all is not a great sign because Durant has not stayed healthy through the playoffs and really most of the regular season the last couple of years. And that is a huge concern for the Suns if they want to try to go back to the final.
Yeah, you brought up a great point. The Suns team is like amazing on paper. it honestly kind of compares with the Kevin Durant Warriors teams a little bit if you want to get that far. But seriously, I don't think Kevin Durant has a healthy season left in him. Like, I think it's going to be his body's under too much of a burden, and I don't really know what the solution is. I don't want to like say that it's like his frame. His body's breaking down in his later years of his career, and I don't know if the Suns will be able to get like a good healthy playoff run together with all four of those guys together. That would be like one of the biggest what if teams that hails in comparison to the Brooklyn Nets team, which he just left, which completely got destroyed by themselves. Guys taking time off, like against their will, guys getting injured, guys not getting along, guys getting traded that made guys want to leave. Like it's just a mess, and it'll further fuel the narrative that Kevin Durant can't win without one of the best teams in NBA history.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, for Durant at this point, he's going to be 35 this year. You mentioned that he probably doesn't have any healthy years left. I agree. We've talked about this a little bit. I just don't like that Warriors narrative. And that's something that he's tried to run away from. That's the reason he went to the Nets with Kyrie, because he would be the number one guy there. I don't even think he's the number one guy in Phoenix. I still think that's Devin Booker, no matter how great Durant is. And the unfortunate part about Durant is because he hasn't stayed healthy, it's hard to put him as one of the best players of all time, even though every time that he was healthy on the floor, he was one of the best players in the NBA in his prime. But his prime was not terribly long when you look at it. With the Thunder, it was pretty relatively close between him and Russ, who was the best player on that team was. It was Durant, but really not by that much, because you have to remember that was when Russ was still in his prime before he totally just lost his shot and had some sort of mental block. Durant's prime was with the Warriors, and if he had gone to another team, we wouldn't be talking about Durant the way that we are right now.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't. And you brought up a good point that it's Devin Booker's team. Yeah, Kevin Durant, like, he's just been in a lot of situations where he hasn't really had ownership of a lineup, and he's been trying very hard to get that ownership of a lineup. I think it's coming too late. We got to keep in mind that Chris Paul is like even older than him and not playing as great too. So they're fighting a really big uphill battle. If Durant is healthy, I think they could easily knock down a Nuggets team. Easily. But
yeah, no, I believe that. Yeah, I believe that to be true. I think that could, if Durant stays healthy, I think that will be the Nuggets' biggest test. I am still very intrigued by the Kings. I just don't know what to make, and I've mentioned this as well. I know that I have, that I don't know what to make of the Kings, and I still don't, even this late in the season. Who knows what's going to happen? But it's just exciting to finally have a good basketball team in Sacramento, and one that you want to watch, not just because they have DeMarcus Cousins, who was one of the best centers when he played for them, or because they have just a star or two. It's because they're actually a solid basketball team, even if they do get bounced earlier than they would want to with how well they've played this year.
Yeah, I feel like that Sacramento team is like really playing with house money this year. Obviously, they want to make a run, but it's not like they're going to be like kicking rocks if they like lose in the first or second round, because like I don't think anyone in that organization thought they would be right now a third seed, and they're probably going to be the second seed in the West to finish the season. Like, no one saw this coming.
No, not at all. I was hoping that they would finally make it to the playoffs as like a fifth or sixth seed, but they've taken, credit to them, they've taken advantage of a very weak West. And you can say, well, like, good for them, like they should, but no other team in the West has been able to do that. Even teams with more talented players have not been able to do that. So you have to give them credit for taking advantage of a weak year to put together a strong lineup, and one that could cause problems for the Nuggets or just make it deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, they will definitely be a problem for any team they face in the first, second, however far they get.
Yeah, and the sad thing for them too, because they don't have a superstar the way the Clippers or Suns or Mavericks do, if they play any of those teams, they'll still be considered underdogs. Which
they're underdogs if they play the 7th seed, honestly. Like, they might be. If it's like the Mavericks or somebody, they're underdogs.
Kind of, but I mean, they've just been, and I get that from the standpoint of, oh, the Mavericks have Luka and therefore have the better player on the court, like have the best player on the two teams on the court. And I understand that, but I don't feel like that is a good way to judge who an underdog is or isn't, especially when it comes to the playoffs, where we've seen teams like the Miami Heat, who, although Jimmy Butler is a great player, is not the best player in the East by a long shot. And the Heat have still made deep playoff runs the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler just turns it on during the postseason, even in crucial moments in the regular season. Like you saw that acrobatic reverse layup against the Sixers a couple weeks ago. Like, he just knows when to turn it on.
He does, but the Heat also have a great roster as well, and I don't think that's where they get enough credit. And it sort of reminds me a lot of this Kings team, where maybe you don't have the perennial scorer or a consensus top 10 player in the NBA. But what you do have is a solid roster. You have a couple of guys that are well above average, and you can build around that and make playoff runs. And that's where I think a lot of teams, especially when you look at Brooklyn, made the mistake of deciding to just go after superstars, getting rid of your best bench players, and deciding that was the way to make a championship team. When clearly that has not been the case. You can look even at the Warriors as well, that they've had deep rosters every single run that they've gone on to win championships. I'm blanking on, give me a sec. The Raptors, when the Raptors won their championship, that was a deep team as well. Jeremy Lin was definitely not anywhere close to where he was with Lin City when he was on that team, but that's still a above average backup point guard to have on your roster and a guy with NBA experience. There was reasons why these teams have won championships, and super teams that have been put together tend to not make successful playoff runs.
Yeah, that was really underrated for the Raptors. Like, everyone was just looking at Kawhi single-handedly, but that team was very deep, and they had Nick Nurse, who really showed his capabilities as a coach that year. So it was definitely a team effort, and people often don't look past Kawhi's effort, especially the 5-bounce shot. A lot of credit to that Raptors team.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite NBA teams in recent memory to win a championship.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to say that.
What's that?
Hard for me to say that.
It is because of that Kawhi, the quadruple doink. But when you look at the way that roster is put together, that they'd struggled for so long to pass the Cavs at the top of the East. And the first year LeBron leaves, they finally do it. It reminded me a lot of when the Knicks finally made it to the finals the year that Jordan was retired, and same with the Magic. It's like the moment that the top players that's stopping you from making it leave, it just opens the window for pretty much anyone as long as they can put together a good roster. And that year it just happened to be the Raptors.
Yeah, I hope to see a run like that in the next couple of years in the NBA.
Yeah, I feel like if it happens again, it's going to come out of the West.
Yeah, but would that be the case if the Nuggets got out? No, it wouldn't, because they're like...
No, because the Nuggets are at a weird place because this is the most open the West has been, but I would argue that that it was open pretty much every other year since the Warriors lost in 2019. So 2020, yes, the Lakers had a great team during the bubble, but the Nuggets also were playing very solid basketball and had to come back. When you look at where the Nuggets have been, they have always been near the top. They just can't put it together. And it hasn't been one team that consistently knocks them out. It's just every basically single team that was above them. So that's where it's a little bit different, where now they've come together. They're now like the consensus top team, which the Raptors weren't even close to being that when they went on their run. There were still 3 other teams ahead of them. So that's where I feel like the Nuggets are different, is the fact they built up enough of a team to finally be the top team, where the Raptors were still kind of in the mix with a bunch of other teams. So that's where it was sort of different, because you didn't expect the Raptors to necessarily make it, where I would be shocked this year if the Nuggets do not make it to the championship.
Yeah. If the Kings want to step up and do that this year, I'm all for it, honestly.
Yep.
All for it.
Yeah, for sure. I was watching March Madness. It's basically started with the tournaments. LaSalle just upset Duquesne in the A10 tournament. So This team that was 11th in the A10 and playing on opening weekend has now made their way into the quarterfinals and will be playing the third-seeded Fordham tomorrow, which I just did not think was going to be possible.
Yeah, so they're playing for a spot in the tournament.
They are. Their record is not good. They would need to win the tournament to get in. And even if they got in, their record would then be 18-18. So my guess is that they'd be playing in the first four in Dayton. I would be shocked if they got in anywhere above that. But I mean, maybe they're given a 14-15 seed that they don't have to do that. But I mean, they've been so inconsistent, which is frustrating because they've got a decent roster and a decent amount of veterans. Actually, two of their guys, Fusini and Hassan Drame, who are twin brothers, played with the St. Peter's team that went to the Elite Eight last year. So they've got veteran guys that have gone on March Madness runs already, but they just haven't been able to put it together. And it's great that they're putting it together now, but they could have put themselves in a much better position to make it in the tournament had they just been more consistent through the regular season.
Yeah, definitely keep us updated and with the tournament and how they play against Fordham. And I need to get into March Madness this season because
there's also
a lot about it.
Yeah, there's one more conference championship that's happening later tonight. We're recording on Wednesday. This is one that totally flew under the radar to me until it was mentioned on the broadcast, and I just didn't know anything about it. So the Big Sky tournament, the Big Sky is a conference that includes like Montana, schools from Montana, sort of Idaho, like that area of the country. So another team that's in there is North Arizona, which is not a team that most people would know. There was no reason to pay attention to them this year. They were 12-22. Actually, no, sorry. They were 9-22 going out of the regular season into the conference play. They were ranked 9th in their seeding in their conference. There was no reason to expect them to do anything. They have upset 3 different teams, including the number 10 seed Idaho, the number 1 seed in the entire Big Sky tournament in Eastern Washington, and then Montana, and will now be playing the second-ranked Montana State in the Big Sky tournament. If they can make it in, they will be one of the worst teams probably ever to make it to March Madness, and it would just be so much fun to watch them.
Make for a good story. I always like rooting for the shit guys in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, this would be so much even above that. This would just be a team that decided, hey, we're just tired of being run over by every team in the Big Sky, and we're just going to totally screw with every single person that decided to bet against us because there's no reason to pick this team to win. And now they're playing for a bid in March Madness with what would be a 13-22 record. And from my memory, I can't remember a team that bad making it into the tournament.
Yeah, that would definitely be history for sure.
Yeah, so a couple other tournaments that the bids have been placed already for teams that have won their conference. Nothing too shocking from what those are like the most shocking ones so far. I guess Louisiana making it, which was originally UL Lafayette. They're not really known as a basketball school. They're much more of a football school. So interesting to see them make it. But, I mean, Missouri Valley Drake, they were clearly the favorite now that Loyola left for the A10. Northern Kentucky's pretty good. Charleston was clearly the best team in the entire Colonial Conference. So there hasn't been too many upsets yet in the smaller tournaments. If you pay attention to the smaller conferences, which I tend to do just because then anyone that follows March Madness will recognize these teams as the team that will be the 16th or 15th seed and get eliminated immediately. It will be interesting to see what happens from now on. I also want to point out that Gonzaga did win the West Coast Conference, even though they've been on a bit of a down year. Not someone that I would necessarily pick to go far in the tournament. They never usually do and usually disappoint, even with better records than this. But I wasn't 100% sold that they would win the West Coast Conference. So good to see a regular face back in the tournament, I guess.
Yeah, it would be weird without seeing Gonzaga in the tournament.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, even if they lost, they would still probably be in with their record. I know that St. Mary's, which is a team that usually finishes second to them, pretty much always makes it into the tournament. But it's been a while since they've lost the West Coast Conference. I don't even know the last time it was. It's sort of like you expect them to always win, sort of the same way that in the past you always expected either North Carolina or Duke to win the ACC. And more college basketball, but quickly to wrap up, Jim Boeheim did announce he's officially retiring from Syracuse. He's been there 47 seasons. Won the national championship in 2003, which was Carmelo's year with the team. Someone who was very much soured on the idea of college basketball, is not a huge fan of the NIL, called out a lot of ACC teams earlier this year for what he said was not necessarily illegally recruiting, but sort of mentioned the fact that they were doing stuff that would be seen as immoral when it comes to recruiting, which is weird because Syracuse was accused a lot of illegally recruiting players. So sort of the pot calling the kettle black on that case. But regardless of all that, Jim Boeheim is one of the best coaches in college basketball history, is known for being one of the reasons why the Big East is where it is now, is because of that Syracuse team in the 80s and 90s that made the Big East popular. So it will be very weird to see a different coach on the Syracuse sideline next season.
Yeah, and that's kind of like a legend going on. I mean, he's not resume is like a Coach K or Roy Williams, but he's been in the game for a long time.
Well, I guess the last thing to add, the World Baseball Classic's happening. It's been kind of fun to watch some of the games. Are at weird times. So definitely tune into that in between watching March Madness.
So I think that'll do it for this week. We'll catch you next Saturday at 2 p.m.